So without further ado, I want to introduce Sophia Fang. She is the marketing the head of marketing at Honeycomb Credit. I'm really excited to have her here today. Whenever I contacted her and asked her to present one of our center programming, she didn't hesitate. She wanted to be here. She is very socially driven. I have been following her work for a while. On Honeycomb Credit, it's a local startup, and that focuses on fundraising and marketing, and it's expanding both here in Pittsburgh and also in other cities. And Sophia has been vital and has been leading those efforts. So right now, in the time of crisis, where everybody's trying to figure out a way to gain visibility and to utilize quick strategies to put out and get your company out, your products and services, and pivoting. I think she is the right person to really tell us, like how can we do that well, and how can we do that fast and effectively. So that is why we brought her here. So thank you so much. I'll let her, also tell us a little bit about yourself before you start the presentation, and then dive in. So thank you so much for being here, Sophia.
Yeah, thanks so much for a great intro, Ania. You did, and I really appreciate Ascender for inviting me here to talk today, and I really appreciate all of you for taking time out of your lovely Thursday evenings to talk about creative strategies and things that we can do today. So a little bit about me. I found Honeycomb Credit through a fellowship called Venture for America. So graduating from college in 2018, I knew that I really wanted to pursue a career in combining social impact and technology, and Venture for America was a great way for me to kickstart my career, and I was fortunate enough to find Honeycomb. And when I heard about Honeycomb, so we're a investment crowdfunding platform that lets you invest in local businesses, I just thought that it's such a cool way to support small businesses and getting the funding they need, and also as a customer, you can take part in shaping your community. So I've moved to Pittsburgh in 2018 and joined Honeycomb as the first marketing hire, the third employee. So it's been really exciting being able to build the brand and the marketing infrastructure from ground up, from figuring out oh my God, we need to clean up the website, to here's all the ways that we're going to be scaling geographically, as well as to help with small businesses specifically in COVID-19. So yeah, let me start sharing my screen, and we can start the presentation now. Cool, can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I kind of introduced myself already, so enough about me. Let's get into the fun stuff. So the plan for today is I'm going to walk through 8 tips around social media and content, ranging from brainstorming ideas to design advice to best practices to take advantage of. And for each of these tips, I'm going to give an example of one of the things that we did here at Honeycomb that really saw the results. And finally, next step, I'm going to be talking about a case study about a new product that we launched during COVID-19, the Honeycomb Relief Loan Program. And it's a scenario where we put a lot of those tips to use to launch a new product. And then at the end, I'm going to finish with some of my observations and predictions around marketing for COVID-19. And I'm going to share a couple of free tools that you can get started today. So my goal for this presentation is that I'm hoping that you'll be able to walk away with some bite-sized tweaks and tangible actions that you can take tomorrow for your business, even if you don't have a background in marketing. So before we jump into social media and content, I just wanted to spend a few moments talking about the importance of building a strong brand. So the way I think of it is your brand should not look like a bag of trail mix. It needs to be consistent and look like the same thing across all of your platforms. So your brand is the personification of your business. And you can think of it as, imagine if you're talking to someone and every time you do, their face changes. Like, wouldn't you be a little freaked out by that? The same goes for your customer experience. So when someone's shopping around, they might start off looking at your Facebook or your Instagram. They might end up on your website and then sign up for the email newsletter and start getting emails. All of these channels and the feel of all of these channels needs to be consistent. You can't necessarily control like how people get to you, but what you can make sure is that this journey is consistent, and for people to saying, oh, I can see how all of these platforms are genetically related. So the next question you might be thinking about is, I know what my brand stands for, or a couple of adjectives that really symbolize my brand, but how do you translate that into visuals or words? My piece of advice on that would be to make sure to set some brand guidelines. I really like this graphic from 99 Design that talks about the 6 essential components of a brand guide. So, some of the ones are very obvious. You need a logo, stick to the colors that you pick a font for your header and your body text. For your imagery, are you going to make it very photography forward? Are you going to do a bunch of gradients? Are you going to do a lot of icons? Pick one and stick to it. And then finally, being able to explain your brand story, the creation of your business, and tying it to the overall feel of the brand is very important, as well as the voice, which is honestly, I would say, the hardest one to get, and is definitely something you want to iterate and really evolve. So if you're starting from day one, it's okay if you haven't figured out all of these things. My advice would just be, once you decide on one of these things, stay strict to the guidelines you set. Cool, so let's move on to social media. And my perspective on social media has always been taking baby steps. It might seem very daunting starting on day one to get to let's post on social every single day. So whatever your bandwidth is currently, try maybe one more post a week, one more idea per week, and it's a much more sustainable and less scary way to grow. In terms of designing for social media and best practices, I always say, I think when you're starting off, there's a tendency to try to cram as much as you can into a single picture, when pictures need room to breathe, just like people. So when you're designing, make sure that you have very big margins. So there should be space between where the edge of your graphic starts and where the edge of all of your design elements, like the pictures and the words, start. My second piece of advice would be, like, white space is your friend. It's okay, and it's honestly preferable to leave more blank space. And I always think of it as imagining a room and you're hanging a picture in your bedroom. You're not going to be sticking pictures on every single nook and cranny of the wall, but you're putting it in the center and leaving it a lot of space to breathe. My third piece of advice would be stick to 3 fonts max on anything you design, whether it be a social post like this or on a presentation, sticking to what the size and the font of the header is going to be, and then what the body text and things like that. And then finally, and also honestly the most important, is the idea of visual hierarchy. So more important things should be bigger and bolder, and the first thing that someone reads and sees. Things that are less important should be smaller. So I put a little example of here on the right of a graphic that's well designed and a graphic where it kind of violates a lot of those rules. The title should be the biggest thing, but on the as you see on the lower one, it's you see live webinar first, likely when you're reading this. There's a bunch of different fonts, like things are all over the place in terms of margins. You can't see the logo clearly because there's not a white space there. So I think hopefully this gives a little bit of a visual around like how these rules really help clean up something, because oftentimes you're already 80% there, and it's a matter of fact of just making it look slightly tighter, and it really makes a big difference. So my next tip is, if you want someone's attention, you've really got to shout it in their face. So oftentimes I see people making beautiful graphics, awesome graphics, and they just post it on their social and just let it be. If you've already put in so much effort, like, you might as well like show it off. So anytime we're posting on Instagram, we're tagging everyone relevant and their grandmas. So what I mean by this is, in this example of Casa Brazil, which is a restaurant in Highland Park, this is a post announcing that they reached their maximum goal. We tagged a lot of our community partners. We tagged community organizations related to like immigrant inclusion. We tagged a lot of press. And it also helps to tag the friends of your customers that you want to woo, or other businesses in the same neighborhood. So I think in a place like this, when you're celebrating success, you should really shout it out and make sure it's actually seeing the eyes of the people you want to get the attention of. Because once they get tagged, they get a notification and they're kind of forced to engage with you. So my next tip for social media is, once you've really gotten a feel of the cadence that you want to post and you feel comfortable with the platform and the medium, try to see if you can templatize some of your most used posts. So what I mean by that is, like once you're trying to scale up your social media, you don't want to be spending every single moment of your day just creating content. It's really important to systematize it. So say, for example, here at Honeycomb, for every campaign, we have different social posts that go out at different milestones. This one, for example, is our Meet the Owner post, which is posted after they hit 50% of their funding goal. And as you can see, all I have to do to make a new one is I change the name of the business, I change the name of the business owner, then I plug in a new picture. So after you finalize that template, it only takes maybe 30 seconds to make a new one. So if your business, does a lot of webinars or does a lot of events and things like that, try to create a template like this. It makes it a lot easier on your own life. It also helps build consistency for your audience members. So when they see a yellow graphic with a circle, they know immediately, oh, that's an owner post. Cool. So next part, I'm going to segue more into content tips. I think content, just as social media, is often a very big, daunting topic. Like, what is content? Like, how do I get started? Where do I even, I'm scared of writing. What if I write something wrong? And there's a lot of questions like that, which I dealt with as well when I first started off. I would say content is honestly anything public facing that can build brand awareness and convey information to help people under buying decision to purchase whatever product or service you have. So to start off, I would really recommend thinking about the psychology of your potential customers. So the first step is thinking about like what are some of your target customers' quirks and behaviors that could correlate to their interest in you. For Honeycomb, for example, the idea of investing local is pretty new, but the behaviors of eating local and shopping local have very strong movements. So we can pretty much guess that, oh, if someone is going to farmers markets or they're going to the locally owned business and not the giant chain, they're probably going to be more likely to become a potential investor in Honeycomb than just any average person out there. And then once you're able to define some of those behaviors, you can really start shaping your content and your marketing campaigns around those behaviors. So here to the right is an example of a blog post that we created during COVID-19. It's a stay-at-home guide highlighting a bunch of local businesses that are offering cool deals and cool services during COVID-19. So this is a great way for someone who, they maybe haven't heard of Honeycomb or haven't heard of the idea of investing local, but they see this on their feed, they click, they are super interested, and then it piques their interest in finding more about what Honeycomb does as well. So when you're thinking about creating content, I would say the golden trio is definitely relevant, timely, and contextual. Relevant being, is this something that your customer cares about? Timely being, is this something that matters right now? And contextually is, are you delivering it in the ways or the channels that they understand and they normally already interact on? So the idea of, I think, although these are good guidelines to have, it's still very, very broad. So if you're starting to lay the groundwork of content, maybe you're starting to write blog posts, maybe you're creating webinars, things like that. As an entry level thing, focusing more on middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel product-centric content is in your favor. So start off answering all of the questions that some of your potential customers might have about your platform or product. It can be like, oh, what are the alternatives to XYZ? Or like, what are the benefits of doing XYZ? So start from writing what you already know, which is what you offer. And like this type of content will help people who are already starting to think about you convert even quickly. Next step, once you've already laid the foundation for your product-centric content, I would recommend focusing more on what your customers might be interested in general. So for Honeycomb, for example, it might be, oh, like, how do I find an architect to build my brick and mortar? Or like, how do I quicken up my cash flow? Things like that. So like, put yourself in the shoes of your customers and then start writing content that really targets what they're interested in. There's also a third category of topic where it's super urgent. And if that's the case, you should write it and publish it as quickly as possible. And two examples of that is, so when the pandemic first started happening, we created this nice little graphic about like all the different ways to support local businesses during COVID-19, and also did a blog post around it. So I think that really hit the relevant, timely, and contextual component very quickly. It's a very shareable format. It's also something that people are having active discussions about. A similar example on the business owner side of our market was we wrote a blog post explaining how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program right when it announced. There was a lot of confusion and a bunch of really just a hard to read documents that the government created to explain the product. So we were able to aggregate all of those and then present it in a very cogent and easily digestible way. So those are definitely two examples of things that just happened really urgently, and things that we wrote up in just the course of an entire day, like deciding at 9 a.m. this is what we're going to write and publishing it before 5 p.m. the same day. Oh yeah, and then another note on the Paycheck Protection Program. Yeah, we had over 1,000 views on that, and business owners were sharing it like all over in local community guides and things like that. So that was one that definitely just amped up really quickly, but it also has a shorter lifeline, and just so the lifetime value of that kind of content, it gives you a lot of short-term juice, but it might not be sustainable for a long-term strategy. Cool. So my next tip for content is customer testimonials are super important. I think we can all agree that it's definitely a trust building tool for potential customers. In our situation, you know, a business owner might see us and say, like, I don't know what, like, if I trust you, but I do trust my friends like Chad and Lauren here who run Millie's Ice Cream. So like, especially in products like Honeycomb, where it's very hyper local and very relationship based. Just being able to see your customers and the words that that they say about you is a super great and easy tool for trust building. The other component of customer testimonials that I don't think people talk too much about is actually the evangelism component of it. So people psychologically feel good when you ask them to say nice things about you. I've realized that. So by asking your customers to provide you with a quote, it's honestly having them experience a second time and reliving why they chose you and validating that they made a right decision in working with you. And my pro tip for asking customer testimonials is ask them at their aha moment or the moment when they're the happiest. So in the context of Honeycomb and the business owners, the aha moment for the businesses is definitely when they have a successful campaign and the money is in the bank. At that point, they're thinking like, I just got, you know, 50,000 more in my bank account, and all my customers love me, and that's why they invested in me. So they're feeling really good about themselves and the decision that they made to work with you. So that's the perfect opportunity to ask them in exchange, like, hey, could you just write a nice quote for us about it? And there's definitely a lot of versatility in terms of how you can use a customer testimonial, which segues into my next tip. When you're creating content, make sure to recycle and upcycle everything you create. Anything that you make can be definitely transformed into a different form, whether that be a blog post, a social post, a quote post. You know, if it's a more educational topic, you could do a follow-up webinar on it. Maybe you want to make a short little video around it. If the social post does really well, you could consider boosting an ad around it, and definitely make sure to send it out on your email newsletter to all of the relevant stakeholders. And my other tip for that is make sure to if you can, to try to post all of these, this content across all of your social media channels to understand really how your follower base might vary across platforms. I think oftentimes we might say like, oh, like I just posted this on Facebook, it's done and dusted. But if you're able to just take that additional step of posting it across all of your channels, it's a great way to just see based on engagement. You can really see the behaviors of your different followers on different bases. So for us, for example, we've discovered that on Facebook, it tends to be more of a two-sided audience that leans towards investors. Instagram our following is heavily small business owners, which isn't surprising because that's what they use to reach their customers as well. Twitter is better for reaching press, journalists, and connecting with other folks in the startup ecosystem and the innovation ecosystem for us. And then finally, LinkedIn is definitely more investor facing and focus on referral partners as well. So we were only able to really understand and gather these feedback by posting the same thing and kind of doing an A/B/C/D test across channels to see which posts get the most engagement where. And then down below, here's an example of continuing the theme of Millie's. We sat down with Millie's, did one 30-minute in-person interview, and were able to crunch this into a lot of different forms, starting from grabbing a quote that they said into something we can post on social, to making a long-form blog for people who really want to get to the story. We sent this out to all the business owners in Pittsburgh, since Millie's is quite well known, to really amplify their story. And then we also created this Facebook ad that talks about their success. So this is just an example of all the different ways that you can just reuse one interaction, one meeting, one piece of content and turn it into a lot of different things. And then next, I've really found that quizzes are a great way for us to build interactivity. And it serves as both a great tool for people who are shopping around, still middle of the funnel, as well as gathering really interesting user feedback about your customers. I think when people get a customer survey, they start feeling really guarded, or they might use their quote unquote LinkedIn voice. But when it's packaged as a quiz, suddenly all the guards are down and it's a super fun experience for them. So one example of this is during Valentine's Day, we made a promotion that talked about which Honeycomb campaign is your true love, and it asks people questions about their behaviors, such as where would we find you on a Saturday, or what's your investing style. About their behavior, and it's also a great way, once they see which campaign actually aligns with them the most, it might actually support them in deciding to invest and finally make that decision. And one really interesting thing we found from just these two questions were 44% of the recipients respondents picked farmers market. So they're all spending their time at a farmer's market on Saturday. And about a third of the people all said portfolio diversification as the reason why they invest on Honeycomb. So once you have this really golden and valuable feedback, you can definitely use this to start tweaking what types of messages and what types of channels or places that you want to target to find more people who are just like your customers. And then those are all the tips that I had. And I wanted to share an example of a scenario where we put a lot of those tips together and really created a product that helps small businesses during COVID-19. So back in March, it was around March 15 when the pandemic just started worsening, we decided to launch the Honeycomb Relief Loan Program. So it's still our crowdfunding platform, but we made a lot of tweaks to the program to make it much more supportive of what small businesses were needing currently. And so the loan has a 45-day payment-free period, and for the first 6 months, business owners pay 3.75% interest, and that later transitioned to a 5 to 7 interest rate over a 3-year loan, depending on how established the business is. So the really interesting thing about this is we built this product and launched it in just 2 days. So I think that really speaks to the timely, relevant, and contextual component of it. And I'm going to share about how we ended up doing that. First step, when we were, this is already on the baseline that we've already figured out the guidelines and the terms of the loan itself. So this is the plan on the marketing side. First step, what we did was write product copy. So writing the taglines or text, just explaining in a couple of sentences exactly what the program is, as well as brainstorming the value props of why this program is beneficial to the customers, and providing the sales team with talking points about it. We also, I think it's a good practice to think about the most difficult or most common questions that you might get from your potential customers, and then craft FAQs around those things. Next step, we built the landing page of like where and how you're going to lead people to the program. For us, like website landing page is fairly accessible and makes a lot of sense to put your form and provide information about the program. So we created a landing page for business owners to apply, and we also put together the social media collateral to announce the product. Next up, we gathered a little bit of feedback from the select customers. So we reached out to some business owners saying like, hey, is this something that would actually help you during this time? Like, is this something you would recommend to your business owner friends? And we made some adjustments based on that. And then finally, the fun part, we launch it, and then we've got to shout it from the rooftops. So we started off shouting it from the rooftops with our closer circle. So in the Facebook post announcing the relief loan program, I tagged over 100 community organizations in our different core markets, sharing it with them. And that really helped build up so many of the community orgs started resharing it and reposting it on their own accounts. We also sent this out to our small business newsletter with thousands of local business owners, letting them know that this is an opportunity available for them. And we also sent out email newsletter blasts to all of our referral partners. So folks who work with small businesses who might not necessarily be a business owner themselves, but are a great advocate. And we asked all of these partners to share as well. So that was a really good way to just set the scene for the building up that traction. And then next step, what we did was doing more third-party and press outreach. So you can imagine at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a frenzy of resource guides that were being created. And basically, if we saw any resource guide on social media, we emailed them and asked them to add us to it. And then we also did press outreach from local, regional, and then later national once there was a lot of traction. And then I think based on what we did with steps 4 and 5, that really set the scene for gaining organic traction across all of these things. So we started seeing like our guide being added nationally, like all across the country, and different people's guides. Like a lot of it, we didn't even do outreach ourselves. and the momentum was definitely building up. So I think we 20x'd our small business inbound with this program, and we were also featured in Forbes, Square, Gusto, and a lot of really cool small business partners who have a national footprint. And then finally, I think it's always important to iterate based on customer feedback and the data points that you have. So starting from the initial page that we had, we've been incrementally adding things. Like we did a webinar about the program, so we added a link to the webinar. We added as featured in Forbes XYZ banner to add more legitimacy for folks who might be hearing about us nationally. And yeah, it's definitely really important to keep on evolving and building just based on what you hear. Cool. So I think right now, I wanted to share a couple of my observations and predictions just around marketing for COVID-19. I think starting off, there's definitely been a lot of marketing fatigue around COVID-19. You're getting email newsletters every single day saying like, we're all in this together, like here's a note from our CEO, blah, 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 blah. And my advice would be if you're creating a product or your product directly relates to COVID-19, I think it makes a lot of sense to message around the pandemic. But if your product doesn't, then it might make more sense to avoid it entirely. Say if you make chicken nuggets or you make chapstick, it just seems like a little bit of a stretch to relate that to COVID-19, and your audience is going to definitely sense that and call you out on it. I think my second observation is that people are definitely craving smaller things that bring them comfort and interactivity during this time. So if you're able to create more bite ways to interact with your customers and bring joy to them, it's really going to be a long-term impact. They're going to remember you after things are back to normal, quote unquote. And then I think the third point relating to the interactivity part is like people are very plugged in digitally now. So it might be less important to be optimizing for email and social media because everyone's constantly plugged in to their phone and opening everything that they get. Just as a data point here at Honeycomb, like our open rates on our investor-facing emails doubled from 20 to 40% just during the duration of COVID-19. So people are definitely looking for anything that can pique their curiosity. So it might not be as important to say like, oh, like send this out at 2 p.m. at XYZ date. And then finally, my hypothesis is that I think marketing messaging is going to shift more from the theme of relief to the topic of recovery. I think now that it's been more than a month, a lot of the initial frenzy is calming down, but there's still a really long journey to rebuilding and recovering and really help strengthen our communities. So depending on what your business does, that might be a good message to start thinking about and start preparing. And then a couple of engagement and opportunities that I think you could take advantage of right now is giveaways are definitely very interactive, especially if you're giving away a gift card or something that brings a small pleasure to their life. And that could range from maybe you're raffling off gift cards of other businesses in your neighborhood.
maybe it's a gift card like of things from your partners. Maybe if you're more of a product or a service, I guess professional services, you could offer a discount on your products for essential workers or healthcare workers. I think there's a lot of opportunity to just explore like not only what your business can provide, but how you can work collaboratively virtually with other businesses to really double, triple, and amplify each other. And then second, I think I'm very much into quizzes, and we've been integrating quizzes into a lot of different facets of our like processes. And I think right now, especially, it's a fun way to just interact with your customers. And then finally, we've definitely been seeing that like, a lot of large companies are cutting back on their ad spend. So because of that, a lot of ad keywords are a little bit cheaper than they were at the start of the year. So if that's a channel that works for you, or if you want to start experimenting and doing a little small test, I think now is a good opportunity to do that. Great. So now we're at the end, and I wanted to share a couple of free tools that can help you get started. In terms of social media and content creation, we create all of our social graphics in Canva. It's a really great tool, and there are a lot of already built templates that you can just use and change up the font and colors to fit your own brand. And it's just been a really great tool. Like, you don't have to need to know Photoshop or any like fancier tools to be able to start creating content on social media. Secondly, I really like this free tool that Facebook offers called Creator Studio, and it allows you to schedule Facebook and Instagram posts directly from your desktop. Like for me, like I really personally hate the tagging accounts on my phone on Instagram. It's just super inconvenient, and I personally dislike it. So I just look for any way that I can just do it all from my laptop and in one place and queue it up, and it just posts whenever it's supposed to, and I don't have to worry about it at all. A third tool is if Instagram is very popular for you and what your channel likes to do. Later has a feature called LinkedIn Bio. Normally on an Instagram bio, you can only add one link to your profile. But if you use this tool, when someone clicks on the link, it actually pops up all the social posts, and you can link each of these posts, social posts, to a different area. So maybe today I want to link to a blog post. This next post I want to link it to the website, etc. If you do a lot of audio transcriptions or in-person interviews, I really like Otter.ai as a quick way to do audio transcriptions. You pretty much just plug in the audio, and then it's able to transcribe it in about 5 to 10 minutes. One thing to keep in mind, though, is it definitely, since it's AI based, it often, excuse me, yeah, it might not register as well for folks where English might be their second language and things like that, or if it's a not commonly used word. So just one thing to keep in mind. Otter AI will probably get you to about 80%, and you'll have to clean it up for the final 20%. And then finally, for social media and content, I really like using Airtable to create content calendars and really track every single post that's going out, especially with Honeycomb right now, when we're posting constantly every single day, at least once or twice. It gets really crazy really quickly. So by building a calendar on Airtable, you're really able to track where everything is and when everything needs to go out. And then finally, here are some random but surprisingly useful tools that have helped me in my role. Is one, there's a website called easygif.com, and you can pretty much upload a bunch of images, and it combines it all together to make GIFs. So it's a fun way to add a little bit of interactivity into your social posts, if that's something you're interested in. I also have these two Chrome extensions that I really enjoy. One is called Full Page Screen Capture. So it allows you to screenshot any web page from start to finish, which really might help when you're prototyping or you're editing and trying to tweak and see what things you want to change up. I also really like Image Downloader, and it's the extension where it lets you download image from any website, because especially in the context of maybe you're putting together a partnership page, or you need a logo of another business, or a background image, this Chrome extension allows you to pretty much download any background image from any website for your own use, which definitely use with entirety. And then finally, for Apple users, QuickTime actually has a great function that allows you to screen record your laptop screen, or if you have an iPhone and you plug in your phone to your laptop with a USB cable, you can actually screen record your phone screen too. So like if you are looking to make a quick prototype or a little like user interview process, then this is a great way to do it without needing too much UX UI design backgrounds. Cool. So those are all the tips that I had, and I would love to hear from all of you now if you have questions about anything like that. And I think we have a really great group right now, and I would love to see if we can have some discussions about just things that you're interested in.
Thank you so much, Sophia. That was amazing. I wrote so many things down. I think Nadili raised her hand. Yes, go ahead.
I have so many questions, so I'll make sure I only ask a couple and then circle back. But from the, thank you so much for the presentation. Very, very helpful. From the content creation side, a few quick questions is, who's in charge of writing the content on your team? How big is that content creation team on your end? And also, what does that content calendar look like? How does it look like, and how are you populate it? Do you spend a whole day, this is what's gonna happen for the next month? How do you organize yourself?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of content in general, there's a couple of different flavors. So on the creating the campaigns itself, that's the customer success team. But anything marketing wise, it's me and another person. For social media and email, like I'm the main person on all of that. And then we also, we really like doing content sprints on our team. So pretty much a sprint is a 2-week period where on the first day you define and figure out like, oh, here's all the things that, ideas that we have. And then next step, prioritize which ones you want to do in this 2-week period. And then finally, like, we have check-ins every single day to just make sure everyone's like on the right place. They're not being blocked by anything. So in terms of that process, it's a lot of people on the team are involved in that. So we tend to bring people in or have people write based on their expertise. Yeah, and then I guess your follow-up question about the Airtable. For social, for example, like, we pretty much plan the content from at the start of the week, and we're definitely trying to become more proactive or think ahead more, but just based on the fact that a lot of the milestones, you can't really predict when the campaign might hit like 100% funded. So we generally just create those posts at the start, and then once it's ready to send it out, we just push it out.
Thank you.
Sophia, just a follow-up question. Does that apply sort of like whenever you are planning for the week, does that apply to right now where, like the crisis is going on, you guys are launching a lot of new campaigns? What's the difference between like what you're doing right now to sort of like what you have done before in terms of your marketing content pushing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, before this whole thing, we were at a very regimented, like 2 weeks, like assign all the projects, everyone's working on them, let's communicate it and get it done in 2 weeks. Now, specifically, marketing has been very like program centric. So say for relief loan, it's just been like anything that needs to be immediate, we just need to get done. We're also in the process of launching a new product on Monday, so that's really been taking up the past 1 or 2 weeks, and it's really been just all hands on deck. And every single morning, like I have a check-in with George and Chip and other folks on our team just to make sure, like, here are the priorities, and let's make sure if there's anything new that comes up, let's prioritize it.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
May I?
Yes. Go ahead.
Sophia, this was awesome. Really, thank you so much.
Glad to hear it.
I learned a lot, and I have a ton of questions, but I'll, like Nadili, I'm going to try to keep it to 1 or 2. So I'm curious, from a tactical standpoint, and I love the fact that you talk about quizzes versus surveys. What are you using to capture, to like launch those and capture that data, and maybe talk a little bit about what that tells you? And then my bigger question is, a lot of what I think I hear you talking about is something I would kind of categorize as influencer marketing. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think about that kind of approach versus, kind of just the outbound. Look, I'm all with you about shouting from the rooftops, but when you have a small voice and you don't have a large audience to hear it, you've got to count on other people that kind of heard that word for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So to answer the first part, for creating quizzes, we really like using Typeform. It's very similar to Google Forms, but it's a lot more interactive, and you can actually bake in like scoring systems and also different trajectories. So like, let's say if someone said, I'm at the farmer's market, that assigns 1 point for them. And in this 1 to 5 range, that sends them to, result 1, like result 2, result 3. So they have a really interesting logic tree and calculator function that allows you to really streamline those processes. I think Typeform there's a free plan where you can, I think, add as many as 10 questions, but for any of the more complicated features like logic tree, you would need to get a subscription for. And it's really cool because it spits out at the end like all the percentages of the answers and things like that. So you're really able to see what people's insights are. And I guess another example of what we did was when small business owners sign up to apply for the relief loan, in the follow-up email, we actually send them a quiz that's pretty much all the qualifying questions that we asked them. Like, how long has your business been operating? Would you say you have community support and stuff like that? So we frame it in a way where it's, we see that you're already interested. Here's a way for you to learn more about if this is a good fit for you. And on our end, we can, when we see the scores, we can say, even before going into the conversations, we know this is going to be a rock star business. Or maybe they seem to be struggling in some other places. So let's see if maybe it's better to direct them to other resources and things like that. And then remind me of your second question again.
So let me just add, I'm sure your salespeople really appreciate the level of pre-qualification that you're able to do with those quizzes, right? I'm sure that's a big part of directing their efforts as well. The other question was about influencer marketing, right? This idea that, and I loved hearing you talk about how when you were trying to make connections with people that could help to spread the word, that eventually that became you appearing in some pretty significant other areas that you didn't even have to reach out to. It seems like that would, again, really kind of be traceable back to this strategy that you had, was trying to reach out to people who could help to amplify and spread the message out, right? Can you talk a little bit more about how you were doing some of that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one really interesting thing, especially because we serve so many small businesses, is that small business owners behave it's kind of a hybrid between consumer facing and selling to a very large enterprise. So they really care about building that personal connection. You know that when you're tagging that business account, it's probably the business owner who's running it. They have so many different hats. So it's really important to balance not only on the enterprise side of like, oh, how is this going to help me, or how is this going to save me money or bring me more revenue, but also relate to them on a personal note. Like, we get how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into creating this business, like so much of the invisible work that people don't see, and we really want to validate that. I would define influencer marketing as, if, say, I was the face of the company and I would just build my personal brand around myself, and like Sophia is the same as Honeycomb, and I don't think that's the case. But I think I think acknowledging and knowing that behind every account, there's someone, an actual human there, who is just looking for ways to amplify their work and like connect their audience with the right tools to succeed. That part is really important. And honestly, with resource guys, sometimes the fear is just getting started. We literally just emailed them like, hey, I saw this, can you add us to this? And they pretty much just did. So especially in a time right now, like when they see that you have a solution that is able to, I think, bridge a lot of the gaps, whether it be on a local or federal basis, they're really willing to put it out there. So it's been crazy because, yeah, the first couple of days was more intentional outreach, and then the rest of the time it was just like, whoa, like we're in here, like Miami's posting about us, like this city of San Diego just posted about us, like this is wild. So I think that's when you start seeing a lot of sources where you've just never heard of, that's a sign that you've really hit a good, nice little viral moment.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And again, well done. This was very helpful.
Thank you so much.
You can go. Yeah. If you also don't forget that we also have the chat box as well, so you can submit your questions there as well.
So what do it sounds like Honeycomb has a team of people who does this and is able to implement all these really great practices for marketing and really getting out there. For teams that are much, smaller, where the whole company is 4 people or it's a solo entrepreneur, what is the kind of the suite of best practices, where can they best start?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So one thing about Honeycomb is we only have a team of 12. So in the big context of things, we're still a very small and scrappy team. So it honestly still blows my mind a lot of times just to see how much we can get done as a group. I would say, like, if you are a solo entrepreneur or like a small team of 2 to 3, if you're able to figure out the best channels for you or the most high impact channels for you and stick to those things, that would be my advice. I think when I joined a company, I was able to explore a little bit across test a bunch of different channels and things like that before we were able to identify it. But I think a lot about being a solo entrepreneur is that you just have so many things to do. And I don't think there's going to be a big difference between posting 4 times a week or 5 times a week. So if you're able to just post even once a week or whatever cadence that might be, that's still a really good footprint. And I think especially when I talk to my friends who have founded companies, they always feel like I don't have a basis, I don't have a following yet, like what's even the point? But my thought is the longer you drag this out, the worse it is. Like say if a VC is going to be, if you're going through funding and a VC looks at you and you say you're a consumer brand and you only have 70 followers on Facebook, they might think like, are they really as good as they say they are? So like for me, when I joined Honeycomb, we only had 180 Instagram followers. And I knew it was a big priority to amp that up quickly, because for us, if we're going out there telling small businesses, hey, we can help you share your story and amplify you, but how do you amplify when you only have like 180 people? So I think depending on what your product is, and sometimes social media is a vanity metric, but if it actually affects trust building, then it's definitely something to prioritize.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I have one. Is there any risk to posting too much or over posting?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, it's hard to quantify, but definitely make sure that everything that you're posting is, again, timely, contextual, and relevant. I would say generally focus on things that are directly related to your company or your business. Like oftentimes, it's great to be an amplifier and resharing really cool things, but if it doesn't really relate to or directly relate to your brand and your business, it might not build your business more. So one example that we did is back in September, we besides our main central Instagram account, we set up city-specific Instagrams. So there's Honeycomb Pittsburgh, Honeycomb Detroit, Honeycomb Cleveland, etc. And one of our partners in Detroit was saying like, oh, can you post about like Kiva on your Instagram? And at that point, we had just enter the market, and I decided we found other ways to do it, but I decided against doing that on just our city Instagram, just because when people don't even know about you and then they suddenly see posts about something completely related, it might dilute the message before you've even built brand awareness. And also just from a mental health side of things, I wouldn't recommend overposting. Like for me personally, I spend maybe 1 to 2 hours a day just queuing up posts and scheduling things, but like any other time I try to stay off social media just for my own overall personal health.
And we have one question in the... So do you have any tips for small business that do not have a website or access to social media presence? It's a great question.
Yeah, great question. So I'm definitely just working with a lot of businesses here. It really depends on, so some businesses are definitely more of the Instagram edgy, very cute storefronts. I think when you're very reliant on that, Instagram and social media is really important, versus you also see a lot of businesses here in Pittsburgh that have been like community beacons. People just know about it and go there, and they don't have any social media trace at all. I think a good example of that is, I think there's a donut shop in Crafton. Is it called Better Made donuts. They never post on social media, but their donuts are sold out in less than 30 minutes when they open every day. So there's definitely ways to do that, and I don't think social media and website are good if it's that initial building, especially if you're a new business right now. It might be very important to do so, but for a lot of these more like community rooted organizations, it's less important. In that case, my suggestion would be like seeing if you can partner with some of the neighborhood organizations or just community minded organizations there to work together on. Like maybe it's doing I saw recently that like Ada Coffee, they were providing food for like healthcare workers and things like that. So I think there's definitely a lot of ways to promote on a neighborhood level, as well as I've seen a lot of businesses do like neighborhood delivery and things like that. Maybe it's like a family meal for dinner and things like that, that you can just like spread based on spread the word about to people in the community, and it'll just happen organically. Yeah, I think it might be a little harder if you are a new business though.
I think there's another question in the chat about reclaiming those small biz pages like Yelp.
Yeah, I personally don't have too much experience on that side of things. I guess I don't want to go on the record as part of Honeycomb for this, but I think there are a lot of bigger national small business organizations focus on small businesses, but like as an owner, it's really important for you to know your rights and really advocate for them. So reviews are important, but it's not going to be the thing that's going to make or break you, as long as you have community support from real people.
Go ahead, please.
Can you say of a campaign that just didn't work that Honeycomb did in terms of marketing, and why didn't it work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can give an example of a lot of times the businesses tend to fail if they're not willing to take that step to actually reach out to their community. That tends to be the biggest change. So one example is,
I guess I should say, let me clarify. I realize that campaign means something different with Honeycomb because people have campaigns on as a company, Honeycomb,
okay.
You produce content, marketing content, and that was a big flop. Can you give an example, if there is one, and what did you learn there?
Yeah, it's actually, those two things are very related. So very early on, we tried out a direct mail campaign to small business owners. So we had a list of 5,000 small businesses here, and we decided to just try it out because we had never done it before. And it's like, oh, if we send it to their storefront, then it's much higher likelihood that they're going to read it. So we spent some marketing budget on it, like made a really nice postcard and send it out, and it was pretty much just crickets. Like I'm very anti any, I wouldn't say anti, but I'm against channels where it's hard to track. Even though we put a landing page specifically for the campaign on the postcards, it just really doesn't capture like how many people saw it or how many people actually went to the website. And that's honestly one of the biggest pieces of valuable information you can get from a campaign. And the other part of it was that the one business lead that we got from it, they decided to run a campaign, and the campaign ultimately failed because they weren't willing to really promote it. as well as the fact that the owner was still using a flip phone and didn't really seem to digitally engage and things like that. So he was having a very hard time promoting his campaign. So I think that really was a good lesson from like a marketing overall campaign component, as well as figuring out what types of businesses tend to succeed on Honeycomb, which are businesses who have a lot of community support, and oftentimes the business owner cares a lot about their brand and is pretty digitally savvy. So we were able to pretty much use that as our qualification, figuring out our qualifications for businesses, which are like, do they have like 50 engagements per social media post in the past 5 posts? Is their website something that's like modern looking, but also like all the functions work? And then looking at their aggregate, like Facebook, Yelp, and other platform reviews, and making sure that it wasn't below 3.5. So we were able to actually use that to figure out some good criteria for us.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sophia. So it's 7 o'clock right now, and just wanted to say, thank you for everything that you share. As if everybody, I'm sure that everybody is gonna walk out with tangible actions, to apply to your business and strategies. I'm definitely gonna go and look up all of those free websites and making sure that I include those in our workflow. So thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing. This is, if you want to give a shout out to Sophia, this is the time to do it. And thank you for attending, everybody who's here. And I'll see you next time at our upcoming event. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.